Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. You're just joining myself, Allison Lane, and legendary powerhouse literary agent, Sam Hyatt, CEO, founder, owner extraordinaire of the Rights Factory. Come on in, get comfy, make sure you have some tea, or in my case, ginger ale nearby. I want you to put where you are in the chat so that we know where you are. I'm in Boston, and Sam, I'm gonna hold on, Sam. You're on mute.
I'm in Toronto now,
Yep, he's in Toronto,
but I go
and
between Toronto and New York.
always on the go. Always on the go. I love it. So where is everybody? Hi from France. What? Ooh, it's really late there. Sorry,
Yeah,
but I'm so glad
France.
you're here.
That's like what, 2:30 or 3:30 in the
But
morning?
it's France, and so they're out and about. Like they're night people. I mean, you have to be, right?
Yeah, they just had dinner. That's right.
Right, exactly. They're like the night is young. So you're everybody who's joining, throw your details in the chat. We want to know where you are and what you're writing. Put it in the chat what your genre is. And it's saying nonfiction is not enough. You know that. Even if you want to go sub, or if you already have a book out, or you know you're meant to write a book. And I see some people I know, and I know that they're meant to write a book. So I'm so happy to see you. We are going to hop in here. Hello, Sedona. I sent you an email. Um, and let me start by saying I'm so happy you're here because publishing should be easier. And Sam and I are dedicated to making your path smoother and clearer and less fraught with brambles and thorn bushes. This should be fun. And so Sam's an amazing new friend, and um, he and I clicked like at a client's book launch, and I think we have the same view on things and what an author should be looking at, but he's so different. So I asked him to come and share his view of what publishers are really wanting now versus maybe even 2 years ago. So this is the way it's going to work. Put your questions in the chat. We will get to them. We're going to start off, though, by saying, welcome to What Publishers Really Want, Insider Tips for Nonfiction Authors in 2025. I'm your host, Allison Lane, and I'm so jazzed to be here. I'm a book coach and marketer and focus completely on nonfiction because whatever, everybody has their thing, and that's mine. And Sam Hyatt, who I just recently met, but instantly clicked, powerhouse literary agent and owner of a really large literary agency, The Rights Factory.
Well, it's kind
Sam,
of medium sized, but we're growing, and we have
it's
we're like a quirky group of um book lovers who believe that our tastes are good enough to kind of foist onto the public. So we seem to be doing that pretty okay right now. We've
yeah.
had a couple of bestsellers in the last couple of years.
Your humility is giving me hives
Oh, was that
hard.
good or bad?
No, it's you're giving me hives, dude. You know, like a couple bestsellers, no, like huge bestsellers, instant bestsellers. I mean, let's celebrate the fact that you you were opening the door to represent and advocate for books that may not have seen the light. So yes, let's start by talking about, we were talking before about what publishers are really looking for just overall, and what some common misperceptions are about what they're looking for. Because you and I were talking about, you know, people really just want to know, like, what is the secret password? What are they really looking for? What am I missing?
So
Because they
probably
feel
the
like they're
most,
doing everything right.
yeah. So I was just commenting to my staff the other day that nobody gets fired for um for being safe. And so when you're dealing with a publishing company, you're dealing with editors who are spending money that is not their own money. And it's hard if you come in with an outlier project for them to say, we understand what this is. And one of my other agents said something really great that applies to this. And he said that when he worked in advertising, all of the clients would come to the advertising agency and they'd say, give us something nobody's ever seen before, something like brilliant. And then they would, and then they'd look at it and say, yeah, that's really an outlier. That's really kind of too crazy. We want something like what everybody else is doing. So part of what you're dealing with when you're dealing with corporate money is that Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, these are billion-dollar companies. And they're billion-dollar companies because they have existing assets that have generated, several books have generated hundreds of millions. If you look at, the people that are doing Agatha Christie, that is I think it's more than 100 million pounds. So that's like $300 or $400 million. And it generates more every year with film rights and new editions, and as long as it's within copyright. And then you have places like Doubleday, where they said once, there was one year where they said Doubleday's losing money because the Dan Brown book that was supposed to come out, which would have sold 50 million copies, is not coming out because it's not ready. So you're dealing with a business that I think, now that it's kind of grown up, looks a lot more like Hollywood than anything else, where they want to have, there are a couple of types of publishing. So there are going to be the places like Minotaur, which is the St. Martin's List, which do these beautiful thriller mysteries, and they have it a niche, and they can bring out a couple books by that writer, like one a year, sometimes two a year, even, because the writers write that fast. They get modest advances, but they earn back their money and they keep growing so they can build a franchise. I mean, it was St. Martin's that discovered, the famous Janet Ivanovich, who's now like a billionaire because of her writing. But they started with just one book and then they built something out of it. So there's that kind of thing, which I would say looks a lot like a Hollywood studio that maybe what Miramax was, or Dimension Films or something, where the equivalent was, we're going to bring out these genre things that everybody knows what it is. They're going to embrace it. The kind of thing like Harlequin and the romance publishers do. And that's $1 billion industry in its own. So you know what you're going to get. You buy the next one and you like it. It's engaging, it's entertaining, and then you forget about it and you're on to the next one. So there is that kind of publishing still. And it seems like here we've got a lot of nonfiction. Should I focus, because I could talk about so many different types of books.
Well, let's talk about nonfiction.
I'm just
And
remembering what I
because
saw. A lot of people
otherwise
are working on memoir,
we're,
narrative
and
nonfiction.
we could do fiction. We could, let me make a vow. We'll come back when you're back from your travels. We'll do fiction.
Okay.
But let's focus on nonfiction today because the criteria is different.
It's a different model completely. I did want to show everybody, I brought one of my books that I love because of the cover. It won an award. It's called The Adult. Isn't that a cute cover? So it was like, you can tell that they designed this for the Instagram age. This is a cover you want to post, and everybody's like, what is that? I want to know more. So it's called The Adult by Bronwyn Fisher. It was published by Little Brown out of New York, and in Canada. It's a Canadian writer, so Random House Canada. And it's a great coming of age novel. That's all I'll say. You can look it up. but I'll move on to nonfiction. So do you want to just ask me some questions, Allison, and I'll
I
answer?
do.
Yeah, let's
Yes,
do
but
that.
I was happy to let you riff, but yes, that's, I have, people have asked questions, so I have them teed up. So, if anyone, if your question comes up and I answer it, amen. But if I don't, make sure you put your questions in the chat. So the biggest question I get, and I think you get too, is how do I know if my book idea is marketable? And and this is for nonfiction, or this thing happened to me and I'd like to write about it, or this is my expertise and I feel like the world needs it. How do I know if this is marketable? And that's tied to question number two: what are publishers looking for right now? So
Okay, so for nonfiction, I know that I'm a kind of like an expert in memoir, so I can tell you that I'm getting some pushback recently from what I think are great memoirs, because they're the kind of emerging thing is this category called memoir plus, where you get a great story, but you're getting almost the equivalent of like a large New Yorker style essay in there about something. So it's like an exploration of something, a deep dive into something that's connected to the person's story. There's also something which is like a memoir investigation, where it's kind of a hybrid book where something happens to you and then you say, I wonder what this means for everybody. This has happened to me, and that's what's motivating me to explore this topic, but I'm going to go
yeah.
research it and interview other people and figure out what it means for all of us. How does this affect the greater society or culture, or people that have this condition or this kind of trauma, or I mean, everything is trauma nowadays, that's
Mhm.
for sure. But so in terms of how do you know you have a good book idea, the easiest way to do it is to figure out what kind of comparables already exist that can kind of highlight why your book is special or different. So if you say, well, gee, my book doesn't actually exist, but it's kind of like a combination of this book and that book, that's kind of, again, that's very Hollywood, but it's how I would do it. And I'd say, oh, that's interesting. You're taking, somebody came to me once and I said, well, what's your idea? And they said, what to expect, what you're expecting, which is a big international bestseller, but
Right.
for X. And I said, oh, and I did some research and I said, that doesn't exist. So the idea is, if you can show that there's a model that's worked before, that gives you a lot of credibility going in, because you're saying, I'm an expert in this area, the way that that person was an expert in that book. Nobody thought that book would work, but it would have worked, but it did. And nobody's got this. And especially when it's dealing with new stuff, like, I don't know if those of you who've read Modern Love columns in the last couple of years, there's a lot more that they've added about how technology is changing our relationships, for example. So, we had somebody pitch us a project, which was like, I'm a sex columnist and I want to do stuff where it's like, what's the future of relationships? So how much of this is going to be like online, and how much of it is going to be like with possibly an avatar of another creature that I'm having a relationship with,
Sweet
which is
mother.
already happening. It's in the news, right? Like, it's a little
Yeah.
strange. So there's always new ideas, and it's a question of, you always have to say, this is how great this new idea is. It hasn't been done, but I'm following this other model that shows that it works. So you're kind of got the best of both worlds. It's like risky-ish because of it's something that nobody else has explored, but that's also intriguing because nobody else has explored it. So there's that. But then it
Mm.
also is following this other model, and whatever they did, we're going to do. And so you'll also notice that in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of focus on like women and women's stories. And there was a great, my book, my most recent bestseller, More, which is this book here, which is a memoir of polyamory, was mentioned in the New York Times. It was mentioned like 5 times last year. We were thrilled every time, including the big interview they did with her. But they mentioned it when they were talking about how they started by talking about Nicole Kidman and Baby Girl, that movie. And they said women who are like women are still have sex lives after menopause. Look at Nicole Kidman, and look at, Molly Road in Winter and More, and and they had a whole bunch of them. And so it's kind of odd that women have been ignored for so long in book culture, but we're making up for that big
I
time.
mean, is it odd? It's not a
No,
surprise,
it's not.
right?
It's
We're
not.
just, we've had it. We're like, enough's enough. And I love that it takes you off too. The indignation that boils underneath this smile every day is like, um, so what you're saying, going back to what do people want? What do publishers want? They want you to show them how your book fits in and says something different, takes a model that has
With as
been
little risk as
successful.
possible.
Yes. With as little risk as possible. That's nice.
Yeah. And
That's
so
like, be different, but not too much.
yeah, no, yeah, that's exactly the thing. So they're spending company money. And part of that, for those of you who don't know how this works, when an editor is interested in a project, they will pitch it to the whole company. And they have to basically, it's a consensus decision. All of the, the sales and marketing people are there, the publicity people, the other editors, the publisher who makes the final decision with the editors, and the sales and marketing people have a lot of vote, a big part of the vote. So they have to have consensus, because what they realized was if they didn't, and they went ahead with the book because the publishers say loved it, or the salespeople loved it, but nobody else. Then when the book comes out, those guys are behind it, but then nobody else is behind it. And people are like, this book is failing. Yeah, we never should have got it. I don't even know why we wanted it.
Wow.
So this way, if we all agree that we want the book, we're invested equally in the book, and it can't fail. Now, that being said, most books fail. So that's the other thing that most of you may not know, that probably 90% of the books come out, they find their market, and they sell, maybe if you're lucky, 1,000 copies, maybe 2,000 copies, and then they kind of peter out. And then even if the author is a promotional machine, things will stop at a certain point. And this is the reason why publishers are now looking really at an author's platform, because, and I've seen this, I don't have the book here, but I have an author who has built, get this, a 7-figure, she was a personal trainer. And then just a year or two before the pandemic, she went online and said, I have 2 kids. I just want to work at home and do my training videos, and people can sign up. And she was a kind of stand-up comic and a mom, and she created this business. And then over the pandemic, it blew up. And her name is Una Duncan, for those of you, OONAGH Duncan. And her book is called Healthy AF. And the paperback, they retitled it for the American market, because they said, we can't get this into Costco and Walmart. So it's called Ditch the Diet. So there's 2 different titles. But I like Healthy AF better. And so what happened with Una is she's exactly what publishers want, because her business keeps growing, and she has one book, which is exactly what her business is about, which is, she starts off by giving you a 28-day challenge. So you do the challenge, everybody loses weight, because guess what? You have to quit drinking. You have to basically have plant-based food. That alone, drink more water, exercise a little bit, that alone. And then when 28 days, you'll lose 4 pounds. And then she's like, there, you lost 4 or 5 pounds. And then now sign up for my year-long program or whatever. And then everybody's like hooked. And then, but so, because she's grown her business, I think her mailing list is now in 6 figures. When I met her, it was like 20,000 people. And the publishers were like a little skeptical. They're like, is that big enough? But then they said, but we like her voice. It is so funny and refreshing and honest. And but I can tell you that as somebody who our agency has done over 420, I think at this point, book deals. I can see the numbers for most of them. I can tell you that twice a year, she gets a really nice check that comes in that would be the equivalent of, a passive income investment, like a security that gives you dividends, or a GIC that gives you interest or something. So it comes in twice a year. It's really happy. And it'll happen forever, as long as her business is there, because anybody who signs up for her for a book that costs maybe $28, it's a great way to be reminded of her when they're not in the program or online with their Facebook group talking about
Mhm.
on their cheat days whether they had chocolate or not, so
Yeah.
I know that's exactly what they want. I have another author that Dr. Christine Gibson, the modern trauma toolkit. And this was a really interesting example because she had a trauma practice and she called me and she said, how do I get a book deal for trauma? And I said, do you want the shortcut or the long answer? And she said, what's the shortcut? And I said, go on TikTok, create a great handle, talk about trauma. As soon as you have 1 million hits on something, call me. So I didn't realize she was going to do this. And then she did it. And then about the pandemic happened and we all got screwed by the pandemic. And then she went on every day and posted something. It was her handle there is TikTok trauma doc. And then one day, one of her posts went viral and got to like 2.5 million views or whatever. And it was mainly female-based trauma. And she was talking about how so much of the classic trauma stuff is men and it's not relatable to women. If you look at Bessel van der Kolk, who's like the legend, the body keeps the score guy.
Right.
Yeah. And the
Now,
other
all
guy,
of his examples are guys who went to war.
yeah, exactly. So, and Gabor
Yeah.
Mate, she's like, these guys were my teachers, but they're not, I want to deal with millennial women who are part of my practice. And I know they have a completely different set of issues.
Right.
So that was really interesting because I gave her this advice. I forgot about it. And then a year later, she said, Sam, do you have room for a new client? And I said, I'm always looking. What do you have?
Yeah, you're like eyebrow raised, like, I
Yeah,
don't
and she said,
know.
well, I got an offer on my book. And I said, we have a book. Like, I didn't even know she's going to do all this. She's awesome. So she said, yeah, I did everything you told me. And then somebody called me and they said, we want to do your book. We saw you on TikTok. And I said, to be honest, guys, that's the best situation where you make it so hard for them to say, we can't ignore this. This person is doing something so interesting and so unique with their own voice. This has to be a book. So you can see it's kind of like what Una was doing in the kind of physical health space that Dr. Gibson was doing in the mental health space. By so many of her things were so edgy. Like she talked about how so much of the DSM was kind of how perverse it was and how kind of evil, like it's just like you have basically, I think it's a little different now, but in the olden days, it was a bunch of gray-haired white men in a room figuring out what was
yeah, it's not that different now. All of our
mental health
diagnoses and
illness.
everything's based on research on white men and also white adolescent boys. So it's terrible.
That sold. Once I knew that there was an offer, I said, okay, here's my contract. She signed it in 2 minutes. And I said, great, now I can represent you. I don't know if you watch like the Lincoln Lawyer, but I need to know that we're working together.
Yeah.
So then once I had that, I was able to, we actually had a bidding war for it. Or actually, no, we turned down a really high offer for reasons I don't want to get into here. But we ended up going with Hachette Go, which is a great body, mind, spirit imprint. And it's a beautiful edition, and we sold in the UK with a Hachette company there. Sometimes a big publisher will take a book in different markets and just do, we'll do so much better because they have double the support for it. So there's another example. So that when I say they want to take it with minimum risk, what you're showing them is a proof of concept for the book, that if people on TikTok are following you and liking your stuff and engaging with you, or it could be Instagram, whatever channel you use, or the mailing list is actually the most professional, because or LinkedIn, if you've got those followers, I can tell you that this wasn't me, but one of my agent friends from London called me for a mentorship call, and she had a client who had 1 million followers on LinkedIn, and the first offer that came was 7 figures. So if you want $1 million advance, get 1 million followers on LinkedIn.
Well, I want to time out and talk about platform right now, because it gives everybody the full body sweats, just the term, because it means like a number. How many is enough? How many people on TikTok need to see one video? But I want to set the record straight. Platform is not one thing or one size fits all. It's also not just TikTok followers. If you don't convert those people to be on your email list, then they are just passing through. They're like bystanders because they don't know that they'll come back to you. They might not even be following you on TikTok. Maybe they just saw your video and they kept on scrolling, even though they count as a view. So, however, you think, so I don't want everyone to think like, oh, I'm going to go over to TikTok and start putting out the hits. It's about how are you engaging with the people who are digesting your whatever you're putting out there, and are they coming back for it? And then are they getting closer to you? Are they going from a social profile to an event? Are they reading your LinkedIn newsletter? If you don't have a LinkedIn newsletter, I want you to put newsletter in the chat. And I'm going to do another workshop just like this, just on LinkedIn newsletters, because they're one of the 3 things that LinkedIn puts SEO behind. So they're sharing your newsletter for free, and let the algorithm work for you. So you do have to capture people and then document the engagement. And all of that goes into a book proposal.
Yes.
Not,
and what you're saying, Allison, is really important. And that is, some writers still believe in the kind of old, the writer in the garret who's struggling. And I mean, it happened to J.K. Rowling. So it does happen still, but that's been a while since that one happened. But for everybody else, you kind of have to have a strategy that you have to look at this as, especially if you're doing nonfiction, you already are an expert at something. Or if it's a memoir, then you're the expert because you're the only one that's lived your life. But whatever you're trying to do, if you can show to the publisher, when they're doing their risk assessment, which is really what an evaluation is, somebody gets excited about something and then they're looking at risk. And so what they want to know is, we like this person, we like the idea, but we can't be convinced from what looks like no engagement. I mean, some writers don't even have a website. And what are they going to do with that? They're going to say, we don't think you're serious. Like, are you trying to reach, eventually, are you going to try to reach an audience and sell your books? And, when I first got started in agenting, we signed somebody who was a major speaker. And all it took was, we had an idea for the book, and the publishers all said, okay, well, tell us about the speaking. And then we got the speaking bureau to print out all the engagements for that year. And there were 30 different engagements, and they were all Fortune 500 companies. And they had the estimate of people that were going to attend. And they looked at it and said, here's our offer. So, platform can be just that. If you're on the speaking circuit, if you're doing workshops already on your website and you've already got a market there, the mailing list is really compelling. The newsletters, as you said, Allison, TikTok and Instagram are special in that they are probably the most random of all of these. The mailing list and newsletter are very specific because you're going to have a high engagement.
Right. You just gave so many value bombs, which is such a cliche word, but we got to pick everything you said apart. So just let's do vocab. Your email is something you send from your email service provider. No, it cannot be your Gmail. From like a MailChimp or Kajabi, people sign up and they want you to send them your wisdom or your tips or your funny cat pictures from you to them. Your email might be designed like a newsletter. A newsletter is more like, instead of looking like a letter, like, Dear Sam, this is what's happening today. Here's a picture of my dog who's right there. A newsletter could still be your newsletter because people use these interchangeably. And the newsletter might be, here are all the things going on, and here's my book recos, and it's a bunch of stuff. Whatever you're sending, so long as it's coming from you, that's your email. When I talk about a LinkedIn newsletter, this is a new thing in the last couple of years. It's an article that people can subscribe to. And that's what LinkedIn now calls your LinkedIn newsletter. That doesn't count as your email. But you can entice people if you have like a LinkedIn following of 1,000 people and you establish your LinkedIn newsletter. On average, 20 to 25% of your connections will subscribe, even the people who have chosen not to see your content. So don't do it yet. Come back when I'll walk you through how the LinkedIn newsletters can really work for you. But what you're saying, so that now I've said my piece about email, but Sam, what you said too is the publisher may be like, this is really interesting, but we need to see proof of concept. So hear me now, and Sam, I know you'll agree, the publisher is not going to give you an offer based on the merits of your concept. It is a product. Your book needs to be able to be sold. They are not your converts or your disciples. They are your distributor. They're a business. So they might personally think like, this is an amazing book, but that does not beget a book deal. Sam, do you agree?
For nonfiction, it's both. And I do want to say one caveat is something like More, which has been such a big bestseller and is now, we've sold it in 8 or 9 languages, and we've already sold it as a property for film and TV with somebody connected with somebody that has a first look deal with Netflix. But what that was something that was so original and so new to the editor. Several editors said, she has no platform, I'm not interested. So we did get that, half of them. But if you have a really good, like an original story, nobody so far has had this story where you've got this beautiful brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn. You've got 2 boys, you've got the traditional family, the husband and wife, and then he's got a girlfriend and she's got a boyfriend, and they make it work. And what was really funny was, the editor called me and she said, I love this proposal. I live in Park Slope. Like this is crazy. Like I know these people, I know the story. So it really resonated with the editor. And then she said, what are the odds they're going to get divorced? Because that would kill the book. Right? Because of the whole, the value, the promise of the book is that you can have your cake and you can eat it too. And so the idea that, and so that was an interesting thing. I hadn't even thought of it, but I thought that is actually the risk to this book. And I immediately called the author, Molly, and we talked, and Molly said, no, we've already sorted all this stuff out. We've had lots of therapy. Like I can put all that in the book, because we only had, it was like a 100-page proposal, but it was a big proposal because it was her first book. And I wanted to show the editors that she could really go the distance. When somebody's an established writer, you could have 2 or 3 sample chapters and that's it. But because she was unknown and didn't have a big platform, I mean, Molly maybe has 6,000 followers now, but when before the book came out, she had 100. So she kind of goes against most of this. And all I can say is that I love the book. The editor loved the book. And when the book came out, the whole world fell in love with the book. There was a moment where everybody was covering it. They said, we've never seen this story before. So that's the kind of one X factor that I want to mention that makes this so interesting, is that we never know when we're going to find it, because what's more traditional is something like this, where you have expertise. There's nothing mind-blowing in here. All she's done, what's interesting and what's original, she's focused it on younger women. This is how younger women deal with trauma. And this is a toolkit to help you with that. So more special. I did want to bring up another book that we did a couple of years ago. And this was an interesting story because it was that memoir investigation thing that I told you about. And I love this form of book where it's like, and it's about a woman who's so devastated because she gets ghosted by her boyfriend of 5 or 6 years. And she can't figure out what happens. So she keeps writing him, he doesn't respond. And she doesn't understand it. And she starts, because of her nature as an academic, she starts to explore what heartbreak is. So the whole book is called heartbroken. And it's kind of half and half. Half it's a memoir, and then she goes back to the very early days, like it's a kind of socio-cultural history of heartbreak. When did this work? When did the heart become the center of human emotions? What does it mean? What did they mean back in the early days to be heartbroken? Who invented it? Was it Shakespeare, who seems to have invented almost everything that it means to be human? And then what does it mean in the modern day? So, and then what you realize is the guy never comes back, and this project is all she's got to kind of, quantify what she felt, especially as time goes on. The heart, as it's wont to, does heal after a while, and then you get into the classic kintsugi metaphor that everybody seems to use. I can't see kintsugi anymore when it comes to heartbreak. I've just seen it too many times. So we're always looking. I'm always looking, and most agents will tell you this. Because you have a big platform doesn't mean that you can be a bad writer. You still have to learn the craft. You have to be you have to compel people with your language. This book is actually incredibly poetic. The writer was a poet who then did an MFA in creative nonfiction to work on the proposal, and actually did the whole manuscript. And it came in to me, and I gave it to one of our agents, and she said, I love this story, I'm going to sell it. And we did. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about our joint book, Jessica Waits.
Yes. And I want to get back to
back in the summer.
Right. So I want to get back to, for anyone out there thinking, I'm freaking busy, I don't have time to build a platform. Please don't go out and think you have to build a platform. You do have to have a freaking website. I'm sorry. And it cannot look like a digital business card. So if you have a website and it does look like a business card, don't worry about it. That's something that can change inside of a day. No sweat. But you do need to be ready to be your best marketer. And Molly is happy to be present for her book. What's so interesting about her and about Jessica Waite is that that story is probably in every neighborhood, but people don't hang it around their necks, right? So for those of you who don't know Jessica Waite, she's very, very gifted, lovely writer. This is her debut. Her husband passed away unexpectedly while traveling abroad, and come to find out, then you learn on the first page, so this is not a spoiler, that he was keeping secrets of addiction and infidelity from her. And so as she was grieving, she was also keeping those secrets from people, because how do you tell people at the memorial service, I just found this out? So that's how the book begins. So she also had no platform. She wasn't out there doing it, but now she is, because we worked.
She found you, Allison? Because I can't remember that part of the story, but I think that you really helped her get all that stuff organized.
Right. I mean, she had 3 different websites that didn't talk to each other. She had never done a podcast interview, and I think what people get, deer in the headlights syndrome about is that someone's going to say, great, can you come on my podcast? And then they're going to say, well, I'm going to talk about the book, so I guess that's the only interview I need to do. No, you're actually not going to talk about the book. You're going to talk about what people are interested in, what they lack, and your experience as a memoirist is what opens the door. But you're not going to sit there and talk about your book, because then nobody buys the book. I mean, if I read the book to you, you'd be like, thanks, and I'm out. You talk about the need for the book, why it's so necessary for people to share their grief, and how grief doesn't fade. It comes in like the tide, and sometimes unexpectedly it sweeps you away. So that's what Jessica needed to be prepared for is, how do you do 50 podcast interviews and offer something fresh that's a solution or an offering without becoming, I'm an expert in grief, which she did not want to be. She's an advocate for people advocating for their own mental health, which is the positioning that she needed to be ready for. And she's doing great.
I'm so glad you were there to help her strategically with that. I can also tell you that when the proposal went out, there was a little bit of flurry of interest, like we sometimes get. The worst thing is when it's like crickets, and then you're like, what did we do wrong? But so there was a flurry of interest. And then one editor, now this is where it's really personal. The same thing that happened with Moore, where an editor is like, this blows my mind. I've never read this story. I'm so gripped by it. It's like a great novel, but it's real, like they're completely into it. And this editor said, this book, there's nothing else like it, because what do you do when you have all this, you find out all these things and you want to have closure with somebody, but they're dead. What do you do? That's what the whole book is about. And he said, this book doesn't exist. This is the first of its kind, where it's looking at a certain slice of the human condition, and it's telling you how somebody dealt with it in a beautiful, it reads like a novel, right? I want to say that both, not so much Heartbroken, which is like an investigation, but it's brilliant. She's very erudite and poetic, but for in both Jessica's case and Molly's case, these could have been novels. If they were afraid to say that it was their story, they could have said, this is a great novel about a woman who finds out after her husband dies that he was not what she thought, and goes on this kind of thing to figure out who he was and wants to have closure with him and can't. So how does she deal with that? And in Molly's story, this is a story of a woman who wants more than what she's got from her marriage, and has to figure out a way to convince everybody, and then does. And there's a couple twists. I won't get into it. There's a great twist,
right?
Own mom in there.
Well, I think it's important that people know that the More is not just for readers who are in Molly's situation, just like The Widow's Guide to Death's Bastards is not just for women who have suffered that loss. How do you heal a relationship when the person is no longer there is everyone's relationship. I mean, everyone loses someone, and then you always discover something about them. Of how do you ask them a question? How do you
But
find?
It's more than that, Allison. Like, one of the things we always say, and I think we're saying it more and more for memoir, is we say this is a book club book, because it is a book that, like, women have never been more obsessed with reading about other women's lives, about the path not chosen, about the thing that I'll never do, but I'm fascinated by. And actually, that's exactly the More reader is. It's not the people that are doing polyamory. A lot of them are like, this is not polyamory. This is not how I would do it. I mean, they're the most critical. What's really compelling are the people that wouldn't, I mean, they might fantasize about it on an off day, but it's like the last thing they think about. But it's so fascinating to go in there and learn about this other kind of psychology of somebody and how they did it, and then say, wow, it's a big old world. And this goes back to the original thing that I wanted to say about women, which is that men don't so much care about other men's lives. It's not a thing. It's like male memoir is a really tough thing to sell. But women, because of, Educated, Wild, like, them all. There's hundreds of them. Eat, Pray, Love. There's a whole canon that's come up. And every year there's more. And, when we contribute to them, we don't even need to have a lot of comps. We just have to say book clubs are devouring these stories that are real, because the fact that they're real gives them more gravity. It's not just fiction. It gives them more media too. That, like, when you talk about the podcasts, how many questions can you ask a novelist? How did you come up with this? Well, I was in the bath one day, I mean, it's not that profound. Whereas, how did you feel when this person did this to you? How shaken were you? I was crying, I was doing this. So you can get very emotional and emotionally engaged in these stories because they're real.
Yeah. I want to move toward not to include memoir, but also the personal storytelling that gets woven in to every nonfiction book, business books. I have one here that I worked on, Artpreneur, a step-by-step guide to making a sustainable living from your creativity. It's full of storytelling. You do have to be able to tell a story, but you also have to know who your audience is. If you're an artist, your audience isn't just artists. It's people who want to have more artistic creativity in their lives. Maybe they're never going to pick up even a finger paint, but this book has helped me so much, and I am not an artist. My stick figures prove it. Um, we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, and personally, people are emailing me. So thank you guys. About what is the most important, most effective means to promote a book. So promoting is awareness, and then marketing is actually to selling, so what are the methods, the tactics? Is it podcasts? Is it speaking engagements? What do you think?
I don't think there's any one. I think some people are good. Some people are very good at speaking. And if you have a great voice and you can think on your feet and you can respond to the podcast, that could be a natural media for you. If you're not as quick on your feet, but you can write like crazy and it's more like the wit of the stairwell for you, like I came up with it after, well, then your revenge is to have a great newsletter because you get a week or 2 weeks to write it, or a few days even, depending on your schedule. So I think and the other thing you can't ignore is who's your real audience. What the publishers want to see is you've already figured out who the audience is and you're catering to them. And then they're like, this is great. We just do the book and the author sells the book to their audience. And what publishers can do, and this is something a lot of people don't understand, they can't create a market for you. They can amplify. And this is why you asked earlier, Allison, this is a really interesting trend, and it's I kind of blows my mind a little, but publishers have now started looking at all the self-published books that are selling and saying, okay, so you're selling this many of those, we could make that 10 times more. We'll give you $1 million for that, for the rights to that series or whatever. So again, it's everything that they're doing is the opposite of risk. And they've now reached a point where, yes, I mean, they have agents pitching them because they want to know that we're not going to waste their time, right? That's why agents exist. If they could even begin to get through 1 million manuscripts that would be submitted to Penguin Random House, which they never could. So they've said, we're not looking at anything, don't send unsolicited stuff, find an agent, because they know that if we're interested, we see a business case for it. So we're one of the first kind of lines of defense that they've created. But now, even though we're pitching them constantly, they're saying, there are more and more self-published books, and what we don't care about the 95% of them that don't sell, which is most of them, right? Most of those books are lucky to sell 200 or 300 copies because those writers have sold to their friends and families and their students, and that's about it. That's over. But the ones that are taking off because the author was really funny and had a great character and a great voice, but it didn't really have a lot of good editing, and they put something out and it's kind of like has potential. It's almost like they've gone to the point where they've signed everything. And I talked to an editor at a big 5 publisher who said that she had signed a book that she knew that it was going to sell, and it wasn't doing very well self-published, but she somehow found it, and she said, I knew I could make it into a big book. And so she bought it as a series from this author, but she said, I'm going to have to fix it because it was never edited, and they're going to have to cut it in half, so they're willing to do that if they can see that the author has already made this huge effort to promote themselves and do all this stuff. And then all they can imagine is, what if we could get that author to partner with us, because we can amplify. We
can make it better. We can make it stronger.
Better.
We can make it sleeker, go farther. That is such a good segue into this next question, which is, how much responsibility is on the author to do the marketing? Like what, I mean, I know.
Ideally, for the big houses, they have a publicist for you, they have a team, they have a sales and marketing, they have a campaign. But I'll be honest, a lot of books, when there is an offer, you kind of have a sense of the marketing plan. And I don't have one here, but sometimes you've seen an ARC. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but if you look at the back of the book, it'll say, you know, multi-city author tour, ARCs, marketing thing with, whatever. It's never film or TV anymore, because all the celebrities are getting on TV, not authors, unless the author is a celebrity. But so they'll tell you what the campaign is, and you can get a sense of the budget. But publishers are usually they're hesitant to commit to a budget until very close to the book coming out. They see the response, and that's usually when they decide what it is, because they're like, this is going to work. And market conditions, books are bought 2 years before they come out, so they don't know. I can tell you with more that they whatever they had held back, they said, no, it's already going to be a bestseller. We got what happened, I can tell you, was that the New York Times, the publicist pitched the New York Times, and they said, we've never seen anything like this. Basically the same response that the original Doubleday had. And then the author said, the journalist said, I want to do a big profile. When can I want to come to her house. We want to take pictures. It was a 3,000 word profile for her first book. Who gets that? And the thing is, that changed the course of everything, because everything moved now to that book. They had like 40, I could wallpaper, my entire house with the press that book got. And then it was on the Times list. And like I said, the rest is history. But nobody knows that 2 years before. So even if they promise certain things, they always find a way to change the mix, because, it's kind of like you've got all this stuff in the pipeline. And then that season, this would have been last January, actually. It was a year ago now that I think the piece came out in the Times, and or maybe a week from now, because I think it was the 14th of February. But once that comes out, then they're like, okay, now our attention is on this. This doesn't happen to most books, so we're going to go with it.
So much of what you just shared is dependent on the actions of people who don't report to the publisher. The publisher is publicizing a book to a list of media that they pitch every single day. And the journalist then decides, no one's covered this, and this is different. And so there's no way that anyone can forecast that. What's great, and a really good example of great marketing, is merchandising the piece to beget more pieces.
That's what a good publicist has to do.
That's the marketing machine. And though I'm going to answer my own question too, because how much marketing will you have to do? You are your own marketer. The publisher promotes the book. They're not in charge of you. They're not there, because outside of Molly, outside of people who are writing memoir, if you are a physician and you have a blog on Psychology Today, that's not enough to get you a book deal, but you can merchandise that, and you are in charge of merchandising that to your next big opportunity, and so on and so on. But the once your book comes out, the publisher isn't saying, great, where else can we get you a column? Because they don't report to you. They're interested in selling the book, which is one way your audience can get your wisdom. They're also not your book, they're not your speaker coach in the same way. So what will you have to do? I mean, you're the star. The book can't speak. It's got to be you, right? You have to be ready to do it, or be ready to get ready. be willing. There are a couple of other questions here. Questions about nonfiction and self-help. Any trends there that you can share, or the memoir but a memoir and health focus
Yes.
and
Self-help, body, mind, spirit, health, those are all growing, because we're becoming more aware of all these things that we didn't realize were unhealthy all the time. The New
right.
Yorker just had a piece about how ultra processed food is killing us. It has no value, no nutritional value. So there's probably going to be a book about that. I mean, we kind of, there's lots of things that we kind of have a feeling about, but until somebody does a study and they have data, we can't really do anything with it.
Right. So many medical practitioners, they say, I want to write the book, but it's already been written. And that came out 3 years ago. And I'm always like, no. There are a zillion books about how to make $1, and I don't think we're poo-pooing them. So there are more books needed about health today versus 3 years ago. Health from your perspective as a anxiety coach versus the book that you're referring to that I've never heard of that you think is the cat's meow.
Well, you can always put a spin on it, right? Like for many years, there was one of the biggest bestsellers of all time is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then I saw that I think his daughter or some female connected to the family did How to Win Friends and Influence People for Women. And I thought, that's a natural one. That's like a great. Probably the new one is going to be How to Win Friends and Influence People online. If that doesn't exist, it will,
So, I know now that you put it out there, for sure, you gave it to the world now.
Yeah, I'm going to get whoever wants to do it.
Yeah. One question I get a lot, and I saw it in the chat too, is memoir and essays in terms of structure, since we're talking about memoir so much.
I've seen some of those announced in Publishers Marketplace and Publishers Weekly. I don't know how well they do, and my worry about them is that that could be like one of those little fashionable things that happen, and then so I think right now it may have stalled. I know a few years ago there were a couple that came out, but I don't know how many of them have either been adapted for film or TV or become bestsellers, and that's what they look for. And if they do, then you kind of have to, if you have one, if you're not already famous, if you're not like an Efron or somebody doing a memoir and stories, or somebody that already has a name recognition factor going, it's tricky. But I think the goal is to publish some of those essays in really hard to get into places. Like if you get something in Vogue or the New Yorker or something, you're going to get a book deal, because to be in there, you have to be that good and you already have a readership, right? So again, you always have to consider that the main two things that those editors are going to be sitting at when they have their Star Chamber meeting looking at your proposal is how original, how good is it, and how are we going to sell it? What's the business case for it?
Right. So and does the author know how to sell it?
Yeah. Is the author already doing stuff to sell it? And probably the laziest publishing is the one that I just said, where the guy, I can't remember who it was, because I was just talking to the agent, and all I knew was I was 1 million followers on LinkedIn, and we had the LinkedIn newsletter that you were talking about that had 400,000 subscribers. And the agent had said to all the publishers, we're looking for 7 figures. So whoever gets 7 figures gets the first, we'll have the first conversation. And that's great. This is really rare, just so you guys know, that an agent can set the price like that. It almost never happens. If you didn't have 1 million of something, you could never do it. So that's a great moment where you have a client that you believe in that has and guess what? There's no book. You don't need the book at this point. All you need is the idea, because they know how big 1 million is. And like, honestly, like 5% of 1 million is a New York Times bestseller, let's face it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's opening up big stuff. Listen, we're coming to a close, and I want to ask you one thing Before I do, I want to say thank you to everyone. If you didn't get your question answered, send me an email and I will answer it, either on my podcast, The Author's Edge, or in another webinar, or I might just even send you a personal note because I'm like that. So if you feel like, my book is almost there and I need some support, send me an email and we can meet. It's free. And if you feel like you're ready for the next chapter, um, you can join my very, very low cost, $37 a month community of people who are badasses, who are really ready to do it, to build their visibility and their platform. Sam, you have an event that you are
Oh yeah,
hosting
I
and
wanted
you
I
wanted
mentioned
to
to
share that.
Allison, and I wanted to mention it to you guys because we don't have enough people to do it, and I don't know if anybody here is interested, but it starts this weekend. I'm gonna post it here.
I have it. I have the link. I'm putting it
You
in the
got it.
chat.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Allison just posted it. Thank you, Allison. So
You
what it
bet.
is every year at the beginning of the year, uh, for this group called So You Want to Write, people sign up with their projects and we meet 3 out of every 4 weeks. Sometimes it's virtual, but often it's on video. And what we do is we spend 6 months working on a book. So it's a real commitment. You have to say, I'm going to spend 3 out of 4 weeks for the next 6 months working on my project. And you present it early, we all read it, we talk about it, and I facilitate it. And people have written books out of this that have come out. I've gotten deals. I don't know if anything's come out yet, but and a lot of people have started and finished a book, which is in fact winning in its own way. But I just, as the link is there, it's just that it starts on Sunday. And I told Emily Potter, who runs it, I told her I was going to do this. So she said it was closing soon. I said, give them till Thursday or Friday in case they decide they want to do it or they have
Yeah,
questions.
jump
Or for
in
next
because I'm
time.
sure that if this is the sort of uh, community event that if this is for you and you just didn't know what your next step needed to be and you feel like that's it, grab your spot now. Don't wait and mull it over because you'll get distracted. You'll have to take the dog out, as I do, and then you won't come back to it. So act now or join the next chapter community. If you're a woman and you are writing nonfiction, that's for you. Only 4 spots left in the So You Want to Write. So if you want one of those 4
Yeah, no,
spots,
we keep it really small. I can't have 20 people doing it. It would just kill me.
all
So
right.
we
So
keep it at, I
zip
think there's
zip.
maybe 2 already. I think it's
Don't
6.
wait until Thursday. Thursday's too far away. These will be gone by tomorrow morning for sure. Sam, what is one tip you want to leave everyone with?
We talked about it earlier briefly, and I think that is, a lot of people feel they have to write the whole book, but I don't think that's true. I think what you want to do is write enough, like work strategically on the book and maybe test some pieces out. If you can do some pieces that are articles, or even if you go on Medium, sometimes that's all you need, or HuffPo, like a free place,
No,
and
don't
test
go
it
on
out.
Medium.
And you can see that they gauge the reaction, because anything can be a proof of concept. I mean, nowadays, the biggest proof of concept, I don't know if you guys know the story of Cat People. It became a movie, but it was originally a short story in the New Yorker. And when it got published, it was just after the Aziz Ansari bad date thing went around. And Cat Person is about a very bad date. And the New Yorker published it, and everybody thought it was real, but it was a story. It wasn't an essay. It wasn't a memoir. And so Cat Person was read by, I think, 3.5 million people. And it was the most read story. It went viral. And so what's interesting to me as an agent is that the agent had that collection with Cat Person in it that she tried to sell the year earlier, couldn't, and they pulled it. And then they said, well, let's publish some of the stories. And then they were thrilled that the New Yorker took one of them. And then they went around and they had a bidding war for the same collection a year later. And they added a novel, that because everybody's like, okay, we want to give you more money, but we need more books to do it, because again, they amortize their risk. And it ended up being several $1 million for a short story collection and a novel. And that was probably, it's never going to earn out. It's probably, you'll never hear of it again. They did,
Right.
Cat Person did become a movie. I saw the trailer, but I don't think I have the, because I've read the story, I'm like, I'm gonna have to wait till I really feel like watching this. It's a little creepy. The guy's a little weird, and it's about a bad date, so I don't know who really wants to go there.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that you're showing up and you're taking action. You're not procrastinating. You don't need to, sit under a tree every single day in order to write your book. If you're writing nonfiction and you're not writing memoir, do not write your whole freaking book first. You need a book proposal and proof of concept, which is about discoverability and visibility. I have personally written proposals inside of a weekend and gotten multiple agent offers. And it can be done. You need to know the market. That's because a proposal is a business document. So
Yeah, think of it as a proposal as a business plan for a book.
it really is. And it becomes your publicity implementation plan for 3 years. So it's so worth spending some time to figure out who is my market. You're probably so close to them, but you're still just thinking too small. Nobody's thinking big enough.
That's so nice of you. Somebody just said more Allison Sam combo. I think we should do one on fiction. I think that'd be fun.
Yes, we should. We should. Because
fiction is completely different, because the platform, they still, by the way, this is new. I just been hearing it for the last year, is if you don't have any platform, even for fiction, they'll ask why. Because you can't be J.D. Salinger anymore, or the female equivalent. Salinger would put a book out and he would go back to his cabin and he'd say, I'm not doing any interviews. I don't want to talk to anybody. But because of
that
Fanny
was
and
nice.
Zoe and Catcher in the Rye, nobody cared.
Yeah. Well, Sam, we'll put something. Well, I think we need to do a couple things. One about I need to do one on merchandising, marketing, and merchandising your results so that you can do less but reach more. That's my jam. And one on fiction, and I'm sure we'll think of more. I love it. Thank you guys for being here. Hazel is super excited. She's, if you have a pet, a cat, I don't have a cat, but please send me cat videos. I asked for a baby cat for Christmas, and I got.
There's cats playing the piano, for God's
sake.
I
know. I'm addicted to them, and every time a cat makes this face, I'm giggles, like I collapse in giggles. I love you guys, and I'm so happy. Hi, Tess. Hi, Francesca. Hi, Dr. Amy. Jenny, thank you for your note. I love it. Dawn, I hope you got my email. Ooh, oh, she smells so bad. Hi, Dr. Rebecca. If everyone is on LinkedIn, go now to LinkedIn. Dr. Rebecca Grunvignoc has a fantastic newsletter called Dream Economics. Do not miss it. It is huge. It will help you understand yourself. She is an economist with the World Bank, but her view of relationships is so unique that Dr. Rebecca, I heard this term the other day, behavioral economist. That's really what you are. I was listening to a podcast and I was like, I have to talk to Dr. Rebecca.
Well, Allison, you pitched me this project. I want to see that proposal. I love that pitch.
Oh, damn. Mic drop at the last moment. Yes, we will get it to you.
Had dinner. You mentioned it.
Yes, I did. I think I couldn't stop talking about it because it's so damn good. She's such a good storyteller. Yes, so go sign up for that. It's with her. Dr. Rebecca is a client, okay, but we pitched a couple of ideas to Psychology Today, and they immediately gave her a blog, like a regular column, and she is churning them out and getting so much engagement that right out of the bat. I mean, I think she had 4 editions, and I was like, whoa, people are sharing her stuff because people really want to understand. themselves and in a different way, not just like sit with yourself and feel how that feels. Like I can't do that. I need to understand more. So Dr. Rebecca is Rebecca with, instead of C's, it's 2 K's. And Grun, Grun. Sorry, I have to put Hazel down. Oh, she's putting it in the chat there. Oh, she sent it only to me. Silly rabbit. Grun Von Yoke. I'll put it up here. Dr. Rebecca Grun Von Yoke. There you go. And her newsletter is Dream Economics. All right. Listen, all of you you're just a big effing deal. Sam, you're so generous with your time. Thank you so much. Your access to you is such a gift. And I know everyone here feels the same way I do. And for those of you thinking, when is it going to be my turn? How do I get my book out? Your book will come out because you care about it. No one cares about it more than you. It's our job to open a door and let you see how it's going to get there. There's no one way, and the way you get there is going to be up to you.
Yeah,
Ooh,
my
I'm getting
favorite
full
quote
body
about,
chills.
my favorite quote about that is a professional writer is an amateur who never gave up.
Damn. All right. Well, with that, thank you. And the replay Eventbrite will make it possible. I have your email addresses, so I will
Thank you,
share
everybody.
Sam's link and my link, and you all know how to reach me. Have a great night.
Bye.
Doodle, 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 doodle. Hi, Jessica Tudors.